so nice to meet you at last.
Likewise.
I got to talk to you on the phone once.
Absolutely.
And I am intimately aware of what you do on this show because I love it. And I've been catching up with some of season 2, all of season 1. I went back and looked at the first episode again. I looked at the last episode again. Oh my God. And the new world that you're entering is astonishingly different.
Yeah.
So my question to start off with, what's more difficult? The rigorous outdoor stuff, the intimate love-making stuff, or the torture and the violence? If you had to answer that question, all three of you jump in.
What's more difficult? Intimate?
Well, I think each have their own challenges and each have their own, positives as well. I mean, I personally love being outside. I mean, some days it gets quite intense, with the weather and all of that, and it can be quite cold, but I kind of relish that.
The challenge is just working with us, isn't it?
And I think my biggest challenge is these two.
Yeah, it's pretty challenging.
Yeah.
Are you very much in a man's world with a lot of the time?
It's a woman's world. We just let them think it's a man's world. No, it's quite a heavy male cast in a sense, but I run the show, so no, Ron runs the show. No, I mean it's interesting. This season we had a lot more female characters come in, and it's always nice when there's some more women around. But it's good fun. I like being one of the boys. I think it's a good laugh.
Yeah, you're a bit of a tomboy.
Mm-hmm.
So you are playing a character who has to remain sort of real and true through whatever period you're in, and you have to play a character that's two different people in two different periods. And how do you navigate that timeline and keep it straight and keep it real?
Well, it's the same person. Claire is Claire no matter what time she's in. I mean, she obviously, circumstances change and she has to adapt to different rules of society or whatever expectations are of her. But I feel like you can never play the period. You have to play the person, and her core hopes and dreams and desires are the same no matter where she is. It's interesting how in France she was almost under more constraints than she had been in Scotland in the 1700s, and it's always that kind of pressure to be a woman as an ornament was something that I felt as well, because these costumes, as gorgeous as they are, and they're each pieces of couture and they're so beautiful, but you feel very constrained in them, and it's just that's sort of the difficulties. But Claire is Claire no matter where she is.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've got different challenges. I'm playing to different people in different times. As Kat says, I think maybe the secret is to play the situation, the sort of the truth of those circumstances, rather than play period or play the kind of the circumstance. I suppose one of the more far-fetched aspects of the stories is the time travel. So yeah, one of the challenges is to sort of root that as much as we can and make that real. What would that be like to sort of come across that, rather than sort of play the sort of sci-fi element of it. It's all about details, really. If you just being truthful to the character and the circumstances and the scene, and looking the other person in the eye and meaning it, usually gets you through it.
Is that it?
Eye contact.
But what do those two characters have in common, besides their lineage, their blood? You must have thought about that.
Yeah. When I first met Ron to talk about the project, and it stayed with me, he said he was as interested in the things that were similar about them as the things that were different about them. And I think we've sort of explored that through the show, finding at different moments maybe aspects of Frankie and Jack and vice versa, and sort of playing that. It's an enjoyable kind of game to play with the audience, and I think makes both characters richer.
Finally
Yeah.
true, absolutely true. So how far do you rely on the Gabaldon novels in terms of informing what you're doing? Do you keep looking at them, or do you ignore them and just look at the script? I mean, how do you handle that?
Yeah, there's a great wealth of information there, and I think we've all read up to where we're at in the situation. There was a point where we kind of started reading ahead, and I think we both found quite early on that it's too much to take on board if you go too far ahead. I mean, there's 8 books, she's writing a 9th. There's all the short stories and companion books as well. But it's important that we also stick to the script that's in front of us and tell that story. But I mean, I know that we will use the books. I still go back to it a lot, just picking out details, and also actually Diana herself is a great source of information. I think she's actually, in a way, without putting her hands on it too much, but she kind of is guiding us in her own way, and I like the fact that we have this dialogue with her. Sometimes it may have nothing to do with the show, but other times, yeah, she'll give us little bits of information that we can work with.
Is her tone in the novels a bit lighter, a little more humorous, perhaps? Would you say than the
the
tone
TV
of the show?
Yeah, I think.
Well, it's weird because sometimes, I think it's the reader brings their own kind of tone, I think, when they're reading it, because you'll find some people who are such adamant fans of the books, and they'll be like, but it was never like that in the book, and you're like, well, actually, all of that information was there. It's just now that we've shown it to you sort of play by play, you're having to live it detail by detail, and that makes it maybe darker or more intense, or maybe when you're reading it, if you don't want to go to those places necessarily within you read it and gloss over things maybe a little bit more. So I think it's interesting, because I think it's such an individual thing what you get out of a book.
Well, this certainly the last sequence of the movie. I mean, when you're dealing the finale of listen to me, I'm such a movie person. I am talking about television. The finale, I have to commend you. It's extraordinary what you all did, all of you, but it's going to a very dark and heavy place because it's film. Mm-hmm. It's harsher and more real. How did you navigate that with Ron Moore in terms of how far to go and he almost made it beautiful in a way, which I found interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is in the book. I think you're probably right that her prose style gives a sort of a lightness, a wit, which I think sometimes we've chosen to move away from for certain sequences, and I guess the end of the show would be an example of that. And also just the nature of physically depicting those things rather than having them described, I think is just a different beast. I mean, yeah, it was... I've forgotten the question.
How did you navigate it?
How did I navigate it? How did we navigate it?
Answering the last question.
I did. How do we navigate it? I mean, there's a lot of talking.
You did a lot of prep for that, as I
A lot of
recall.
prep,
You told me.
A lot of conversations with the writers, and maybe that was some of the stuff that we discussed most in terms of sort of the tone of it. I was concerned for it not just to be just unpleasant, so not just a torture sequence, to try and make it rooted in something that felt emotional and psychological, so that it was a dialogue, a sort of dance between these two people that had some sort of scale to it, rather than just gratuitous violence, and that feeling is important to me. So yeah, so digging into him kind of trying to unpick this man, an investigation of another human being, and all those things I think help to make it hopefully more kind of existential, maybe, or those are the sort of things we were sort of striving for, I think.
As far as spoilers are concerned, what are we allowed to say about what is... There's a question mark at the end of that about your
Is it ever
existence,
wrong?
and then we move into the sort of post-traumatic stress that you all are coping with and in the new season. What are we allowed to talk about here?
Ooh, not very much,
Very
unfortunately.
little,
But I think the thing that is important to remember that Blackjack lives in this relationship, whether or not he's alive in life. He's very much present, and he's continuing to poison the sort of core of what they have, their intimacy, and that's sort of a very important plot line in the first few episodes, and we're not allowed to talk about maybe what happens afterwards, but I think that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, and I think we do obviously continue with that storyline, but also there season 2 is that they're on this mission, and that does take over quite significantly of the storyline, and it does somehow play into their relationship quite a lot, and we see their relationship almost implode on itself, I think. But we do hark back to what happened in season 1. It's so hard. We're talking around spoilers here.
It's like it's in a book.
Right.
It's like it shouldn't be a spoiler. But
Some of us haven't gotten to the end of all the books, but the other thing that I love about this, the time travel aspect and the way that a woman from a relatively modern time it's about the gender roles that everybody plays, and we get to really sort of dig into the power dynamics between men and women among them, and that's, I think, what people are really responding to. And did it heighten your consciousness as you were dealing with some of these things?
oh, very much so. I mean, just having these conversations make you question your own viewpoint on it, and I think that I've made a point of trying to educate myself a little bit more on where we are as women, where we've come from, what the sort of feminist movement has been. I mean, I think you have to sort of become more aware of that, or maybe you don't have to, it just has. But I think the great thing about Claire is that she, coming from the 40s, that was a real time of emancipation for women because of the war. They were sort of sent to work while the men were away fighting, and for Claire, being a nurse on the front lines, I mean, this was a very new role for women, so she feels just an equal. I don't think Claire sees herself as a strong woman. She just sees herself as, a person with an opinion, and she demands her space, and she demands to be heard. And I think that that's a really interesting thing, because we have a great balanced view. I mean, a lot of people talk about sort of female gaze and all of those things, but I also think that, perhaps in a show where you have a central male character, then you have very thinly written women. But here we have a very balanced world. You have this fantastic female character, and then these really complex, deep male characters as well. So you see honest relationships, and hopefully, and you see a balanced viewpoint.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Do you all think that the fact that this does have the material, the historic romance genre, the sci-fi genre, whatever this is, fantasy, and the fact that there is a focus on women, has it made the series been taken less seriously than it might be otherwise? By awards voters and such? I thought you were all robbed last time. This is a high-quality show. I mean, everyone involved is doing high-quality work.
Yeah, I think sci-fi does have a bad rap for that, doesn't it? It gets slightly sort of ghettoized. I mean, apart from the time travel, which is obviously, but it's not actually. It doesn't feel like a sci-fi show. But I think it's also hard to categorize. So maybe people get put off by that name. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know what was in their minds. But I mean, hopefully, just through word of mouth and through the strength of the material, that it's getting a bigger audience. And
it's popular. That's not the issue.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so nice when you do meet people who have come to it sort of not of their own accord, and they're so pleasantly surprised that they got into it. And you meet an awful lot of people like that, and I think that whatever a new show is, there's always some kind of handicap that you have to go out and find your audience. And I think that the quality of our show hopefully will stand to it. And
getting those nominations from the Globes,
Absolutely.
that's great for us. Really helped to sort of put us on that
Recognition, yeah.
So, thanks to them.
yeah.
The Hollywood Foreign Press Association. What do you know? Well, now you're in Paris, and you cleaned up a good deal, and that red dress. Just for a moment, humor me with the discussion of the red dress.
I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, it's such an iconic image from the books, and it's a real fan moment. And I think, Terry relishes getting those moments to really push the boat. And it's 4 foot too wide, so it's perhaps not the most easy to maneuver in. There was a lot of sideways walking through doorways, and I felt like I needed my own beeping, like those trucks have when they're reversing, just coming through.
You sat down at one point, memorably.
I mean, you can. But it's. I mean, the workmanship that went into it. There's a whole cage underneath, and Terry does her research so fantastically that everything is as it would have been then. And I think that, it has to stand out and pop. And it was a nice moment for the character to sort of play with her femininity. And, they have this quite funny exchange where he's like, "What the hell are you wearing?" And she's like, "Well, I have helped design it." And, Claire came from a time where there was still rationing with clothes and everything in the 40s. And so I think this is the first time that she has an opportunity to really explore this like feminine kind of playful side. And I don't think that she resides there very long, but I think for those moments it's a really fun moment.
So one of the things all of you are dealing with, it seems, is the damage that war does wreak on human beings, and each and every one of you. And that's still going on, and as you head into this new season, it's you're still dealing with those wounds and trying to heal them.
Absolutely, and I think it's, as I said before, it definitely affects the relationship, and they lose contact with each other in a way, and they have their own ways of dealing with it. Claire's very supportive, I think, of Jamie in his his scenario. But I think the thing that we said before, the thing that really connects them actually is this new hope that they've got, this new life that's growing inside of her, and I think it's certainly a way that they reconnect and sort of hash it out as well.
Well, you do see this theme comes up more and more in season 2, and it is interesting to sort of watch and to explore how relationships survive within these contexts, how family survives, what is life has to go on even in a war zone, and it's sometimes it's having the luxury of even dealing with it. I mean, last season was very reactionary. It was very much she went from one situation to the next, and there was never really time to allow any of that to be contemplative about any of that, or to allow her to see how she's affected. And this season, I think, because they're in one place for an extended period of time, you see both Jamie and Claire having to really deal with the effects of events, and I think it's a really deeper examination of these characters, I think.
It was probably a little bit easier not having to run around on horseback in the exterior locations. And do you miss Scotland a bit?
I think actually the first half of the season is in Paris, or back in the future. No, the second half of the season we do return back to Scotland, and I think that makes this season really interesting. That it's got this sort of juxtaposition, and I think they complement each other really well. And also for the characters to return back to Scotland as well as us as actors, I think there was almost a relief or a familiarity with going back to Scotland and returning to an old friend, and also the characters they find some sort of solace and healing property in returning home.
Did you talk about war? Because obviously in this season Jamie and Claire are trying to stop a war happening, trying to change the course of history. And obviously that also then speaks to the fact that a lot of the characters in the piece are all formed by different wars. Obviously Frank by the Second World War, and Jack by the Jacobite Rebellion, and Jamie by Jacobite. Yeah.
So it's a lot of post-traumatic stress that's
Yeah.
affecting these people.
Yeah.
Because how did Black Jack get to be who he is if war didn't make him that way?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely how I approached it. I wanted him to be a product of what he'd been through, rather than just born like that. So so tried to root it so much in what that what that period was like, and it was a really really brutal sort of insurgency war, and that seemed so those how war forms people is a big theme within the piece, I think.
So finally, in order for this to work, the three of you have to be evenly matched, able to hold up against each other, duke it out evenly. And I that's in the casting a little bit, but it seems to work. If you weren't, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I think we are
You're
all-
willing to give each other serious grief, is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to
I
ask
think
you.
those are the scenes that we enjoy the most. I think
Yeah.
whenever we get to
Yeah.
really tear tongues out of each other,
Yeah.
I think that it's you get the exposition, but then when you get the scenes that are really character driven and and high stakes, I think that we all really embrace that and enjoy. It's nice to bounce off.
And I am very forgiving when the boys bruise me and hurt me. So.
Cheers. Yeah.
Was
Yeah,
there a
that's
scene
amazing.
where you really smacked her one?
Oh, I came away from
sometimes.
one particular scene
Sometimes I
with
was
many cuts
less
and
than
bruises.
coordinated. Yeah.
But I think you have to. I think all of us share a similar approach to acting in the way that I think we all
Want to go there a bit.
want to go
Yeah.
there and believe that there's no point in doing it unless you do it truthfully. And I think that it wouldn't work otherwise.
The more
Yeah.
bloody, the better.
Also great is that we all
Just going to answer the last question.
Summarise it.
all good. No, I'm good.